This is the Kitchen Sink WP Podcast, episode 550.
I program my own computer.
We have a server crash, 404 error, page not found, links aren't working, system is crashing, system is crashing, system is crashing.
Your old HTML website, barely alive. We have the technology. We have WordPress. A new website, better than it was before. Better, stronger, faster. Why, hello everybody, this is Adam Silver, the host of the Kitchen Sink WP Podcast. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. All right, upcoming events. We have one next weekend. It's called the Do Action Bhopal 2024. So it's per their website, it is a charity hackathon taking place on Sunday, September 15th. It's an exciting event that unites the WordPress Bhopal community to create impactful websites for local NGOs. So that's pretty cool. So if you're in that part of the world, you should definitely go. Yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, moving on to segment one in the news. One thing to talk about here real quick, in case you missed it. So I think 2 years ago, Automattic acquired Tumblr. And now, most recently, Automattic is migrating Tumblr to WordPress. There was a big blog post on that over on automattic.com because they're hiring to get some people to apply to help. If you are a developer, if that's your skill set, you should check that out as well. Link in the show notes about that migration and what they're looking for as well. So there's that. Anything else in the news? Nope, kind of a light news week. And that leads me to segment two, the meat potatoes of this week's episode, which is an interview with someone long overdue, my good friend, Dustin Hartzler. This was going to be part of the series, Where Are They Now? But condensing down the past 6 years of where he's been since he was last on the podcast, and the fact that he's one of my best friends, and I've known him for over 10 years now. So I decided to bring him back and get a much longer, in-depth story of what's gone on with him in the past 10 years while working at Automattic, the roles, how things have just changed for him in his life. It's pretty interesting. So take a listen here with my interview with my good friend Dustin. Come back after that with the tip and tool of the week. All right, here's the interview. Today, I am joined by Dustin Hartzler. Dustin is a husband, a father, a great friend, a WordPress enthusiast. He works at Automattic. More on that in a bit. He's obsessed, apparently still, with Apple gadgets. This I know for sure. He enjoys traveling, outdoor activities, weightlifting, all that kind of stuff. Welcome back to the podcast, Dustin.
Why, hello. Thanks for having me back.
Of course.
It's been a while.
It has been a bit. As we were talking pre-recording, it's been at least, I think episode 100 was the last time you were on. Before that, it was episode 2. And the reason you're here is because I'm doing a Where Are They Now series. But in your case, and also one other person in our world, we know each other way too well to have you just contribute 3 minutes of Where Are They Now in the past, 10 years of WordPress work and life, etc. So before we get to that, for those who may not know you and people don't know how we know each other, I always start interviews with how we might know each other. In this case, we know each other. I know this story oh so well. You have a podcast as well. Oh, we'll get to that too, by the way. And that was, it is, what's it actually, you're a WordPress engineer. Mm-hmm. You're a website engineer, excuse me.
You're a website engineer.
And way back in the day, 10, 11 years ago, you put out a call to talk to other people using WordPress to get what tools we're using. I reached out, and that's how we met. And then you interviewed me. I remember being really nervous on that first episode. And I remember hearing it like a few days later. I was running on the track. I was living in LA still. And there it was. And then I remember contacting you like about a week later on Skype before Zoom and stuff to do like a video call. You're like, you answer like, hello? And now look at us. Right? We talk all the time. Anyway, so that's how we've met for those who didn't know. And again, you've been on 2 episodes on this podcast. You were also a frequent guest on the other podcast we had with Kyle Maurer, the Get Options podcast. That was a lot of fun as well. But for those who don't know you in your space and what you do in WordPress, tell us, how did you get here into WordPress? Just kind of the brief version of that WordPress origin story.
Yeah. So thanks, Adam, for having me on. And honestly, the real reason that I'm here and doing a live interview is because Adam said, can you do a recap of what's happened in the last 10 years? And I was like, I don't remember what I said the last time I was on the show. So let's have a real conversation.
Yes.
But I got my start in WordPress in I think it was 2009, I guess. I started with websites when I was in college. I was in college from 2002 to 2007. And this was kind of like when you were barely using Amazon to buy books and stuff like that. Like that were pretty early on, but every student in the university had their own little FTP server. And so I was learning how to use like Adobe. What was the Adobe thing that was used to be called? Whatever, like
Dreamweaver.
Dreamweaver. Yeah. We could build sites with Dreamweaver and build out forms and collect data with PHP. And so I was doing that for like some of the residence life things that I was in. And then I kept hearing about WordPress and I wasn't 100% sure about it. And then one of my friends from college, he was running for a local seat I think he was running for county commissioner in the county that he was in. And so I'm like, well, I'll build you a website. Like I'll do it for free. It's not a big deal, but I want to learn how to use this other thing. And my big into WordPress was the menus. That was my biggest thing, because when you HTML hard code a website and you forget that you needed to add like, oh, I would need to add a services menu, or I need to add like this page that they now, all of a sudden tell me about. It's like, oh yeah, I got to go back in and open up all the files and re-edit all the menus. And like right when I started with WordPress was like 2.9 to 3.0 is right kind of where I started.
Same.
And that's right when we started with those live menus. Build a menu and then they're on every single page. And so that's how I got my start with WordPress. I think I was very frustrated in the fact that this is going to take forever. I don't understand how this works. But I had a lot of fun and I was able to build that site for him. And he's county commissioner.
On a total tangent, on the windows though, do you remember you had to give them different numbers to have them show up in the right space in like the navigation toolbar?
Yes.
You couldn't drag and drop. You had to, if you wanted to add a page in the menu, if you will, like about in spot number 5, you have to go renumber them all. Mm-hmm. That's the old school. That's how old we are.
Right. Yes. But that's still like very kind of late in the WordPress journey, right? Like if you're thinking, that was 2009 and that was, 15 years ago.
Right.
And look where that was 5 years into the journey of WordPress. So crazy.
Yeah. So that said, okay, so that's kind of your origin story. So you have been at Automattic now for how long?
It'll be 11 years in December.
Okay. And prior to that, you had a full-time job, Maytag?
Whirlpool. I was a full-time test engineer, electronics engineer. I have a degree in electrical engineering, computer science background. And then I did that for 3 years after graduating college. Right. And then my wife and I moved to the Dayton, Ohio area. She was a professor at the time. And I was like, I'm not commuting to and from work 2 hours each way. That seems a little bananas. And so then I started my own web development agency, if you will, like kind of like a lot of people that are listening probably do, or, help people with websites. And I was always the guy that was like, oh yeah, I can do that. That'll be like $50 or, $100 here. And I'll build a whole site, like $500. Like that's great. Cause we went from the fact that like my wife was a pharmacy resident, and like I was an engineer, and like her new pharmacy salary was the same as like the two of us combined. So it's like, well, I don't need a lot. And I was like paying off our loans, is like every dollar I got was just going towards loans or whatnot. And then kind of into the journey, I did that maybe 3.5 years. I loved it, but I really enjoyed teaching people about WordPress. Like that was my favorite thing. Like, and that's kind of what spawned the podcast. The podcast started in December of 2010. So that's been almost 14 years too. So that's kind of a long time since I started that. And from there, I was just telling people how to do things in WordPress. And so often they're like, yeah, can you just do it for me? Like, I'll just hire you to do it. And then I got to the point where it's like all these little projects are cool, but then I discovered Automattic, and they were looking to hire happiness engineers, and they are basically the customer support team for WordPress.com. That's all that Automattic had as an offering. I mean, there was Jetpack and there was WordPress.com. Like that was, and VIP, I think, was still kind of in its infancy. Like, but that's all there was. And as I was kind of like making some notes for like what was going on 10 years ago, WordPress.com was just WordPress.com. There was no plugins. There was no like premium hosting. There was no e-commerce element at all. Right. So like all of our questions were basically, how do you style things with CSS? And I forgot to renew my domain. How do I get my domain back?
There was no WooCommerce then either. It was Woo, but it wasn't owned by Automattic.
Right. I think Woo Themes was around because I remember using WooCommerce and Woo Themes for some client projects, probably in the 2010, 2011 period. Right. But then even to at that point, I was scared of like using SSL certificates. Like, I'm like, I don't want to take payments. Like, how about you just offer PayPal as your payment option? And now it's like 100% different. Like, no, we're not going to offer.
I offered PayPal, or offered Ease Malcart, or Mal's eCart. I think it was called. Yeah, Mal's eCart was another like.
And there was another one. I forget what it was called, but it basically would like clone your site. So you would check out, and you get to the checkout page, and you would hit pay. and then it would have cloned your WordPress site onto like a secure server, and they could use the payment checkout
Oh my
there.
gosh.
And then you could come back to your WordPress site. So you're never actually taking a payment on your site. I forget what that was called. I'd have to look that up.
Yeah.
It was a legacy thing. But now, SSL certificates are kind of a thing of the past. Like every host does them automatically. Remember how in the olden days, it was like you had to install them or you had to talk to somebody and like, is it paid? Is it not? Like, I don't know how to do this. Like
what level?
So everything has come a long way since that started. So that was 2014. I had my daughter she was just like 6 months old, kind of like 10-ish years ago from now. And so like, that's kind of where I was. There was Automattic was very basic. There wasn't a lot of going on. And then we, as Automattic, they purchased Woo Themes that turned into WooCommerce. And that's an entire division now that has hundreds of people working on it. There's VIP, there's all kinds of things that are happening inside. So my journey has not been a linear journey by any stretch of the imagination of Automattic. I've been all over the place. We can dive into that or whichever way you want to go with the conversation.
I wanted to ask, okay, so, people also may remember, or I've mentioned on the podcast, you and I applied pretty much at the same time. We both read A Year Without Pants. We're like, this looks like the most amazing company to work for. You were definitely further along in community, in support, because you were actually on the forums answering questions as well, doing stuff on Twitter, now X, and I read the book too, and we were both like, let's go. So we applied. You get in, because you had the podcast. You actually had more runway, you had more experience, more depth. Mm-hmm. You get in, you get to go through the trial. I remember living vicariously through you. You get it, it's pretty amazing. And then you get hired and you go right to Grand Meetup, right? Which is at the time it was small. The company was much smaller, but it was like all these everything's kind of covered. It's just amazing. You meet all the people, and then over the years, you've gone to all the other meetups and stuff. And then we go to, of course, WordCamps together. We stay together, whatnot. And I've applied a handful of times. Again, as people may know, haven't gotten through that wall, if you will. Most recently, I applied for, because I was asked to submit for Tavern, ironically, which is tangentially related to, obviously, it's the WP Tavern. But at this point, it's a different company, right? But I do want to dive in now, technically, to the different roles. You started off as happiness. Mm-hmm. How long were you doing that for?
So I did happiness. I did WordPress.com happiness for 2 years.
Okay.
And then in July of 2015 is when the sale was final from Woo Themes and WooCommerce joined the umbrella at Automattic.
Right.
And they were part of the company for maybe 3 or 4 months, maybe not even that long. I think maybe September of that year of 2015, I moved to WooCommerce happiness. I don't know if we were called that, or it was kind of a big umbrella at the time, but basically there was a lot of like, Woo Themes did everything this way and Automattic did things this way. And so I was kind of like a bridge to kind of help those things. And they were like 13 days past SLA, which is like the service level agreement that we have to like answer tickets. So like think about you're an e-commerce store, you submit a ticket because your payment gateway is broken and you're going to get a response in 14 days. Like that's not a way to run a business. So like I'm like, let me jump in. I'll help out there. I did WooCommerce support until like 2021. So I was on a WooCommerce team. I bounced between like some hybrid teams. Some were like on WordPress.com. Some were like on just WooCommerce. So I kind of bounced back and forth. And then I did a developer apprenticeship. We had like an internal program that was helping like anyone in the company that if they were interested in developing, they could go through this program. And so I did a journey there. I was on WordPress VIP for a while, which was like an eye-opening experience to see like how the biggest of big sites do their thing. So I was there for a while. It didn't meet all the requirements to fulfill the apprenticeship. And then I was moved a couple more times based on business needs and different things. I worked on CrowdSignal a while, and then on Jetpack, and did some really cool things. Actually, right now, there is a new program out there called Automattic for Agencies, and it allows people to like manage all their WordPress.com stuff or WooCommerce plugins and extensions. That was the piece of the puzzle that I was working on 2 years ago when I was on the Jetpack team. It was just called for agencies. I think it was Jetpack for Agencies. And so it's kind of been rebranded or whatnot. And then like, I did not have what it took to be a developer at Automattic. Like these people are smart. Like,
and for those who don't know, you're smart. I mean, you have an EE. From my perspective, you're a developer. I've learned enough from you and from Kyle, and I know enough of development stuff. I can look at some code, but looking at the differences is, you hard code stuff. I remember back in the day when you had your agency, you would buy a theme, the HTML version, rip everything out, because you wanted the functionality, some of it there, but then you would just kind of recode some of it. Whereas I always thought that was a lot of extra work, but you enjoyed doing that,
Yeah. I like the visuals. Like I'm not a designer. So like if I found a theme that was really nice, I wanted that theme, but I didn't want all the stuff, the bloat that comes with like themes that some people build.
But I want the listeners to know, to say that you didn't cut it, from my perspective, I mean, that's not honest. You the fact that you own that, it's one thing, but to hear that is crazy to think like, okay, if Dustin can't cut it, well, I'm never going to be a developer there, which is fine. I don't consider myself a developer at that level, So,
I think the difficult part for me is like, I'm all in. I love WordPress,
right?
But like my developer stuff that I was working on, some of it was like building blocks. Some of it was just like straight React and TypeScript. And it's like, these are different languages that I don't really have any familiarity with.
Right.
But anyways, the journey ended and I moved back to WordPress.com happiness. That was in, April of last year, 2023.
Okay.
So I was there like 6 months, which actually was a really good experience for me. The WordPress.com world is different than a lot of like self-hosted folks. They're brand new. They're just starting to learn, and folks needed help developing and like setting up sites with full site editing. I'd been out of the space for a long time and hearing rumors of full site editing. And I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't get it. I don't know. And then people would come and say like, I'm here. Like, how do I do this? And like, I was figuring it out on the fly. And so that's kind of like where my love for like the full site editing thing came. That was last year, middle of last year. And like, I'd love to like build everything on full site editing just because I can see the value in being able to like, hey, somebody else can update the content. Like, I still have a whole bunch of sites that are like hard coded that I have to make all the changes. And now I'm the bottleneck and whatnot, but we won't get into that. But anyways, I was at WordPress.com for a while, happiness. And then around the time of WordCamp US last year, they basically said, we need 6 happiness engineers from WordPress.com to move to WooCommerce. And I'm like, I'm a WooCommerce happiness engineer. Just take me. Like if I don't volunteer, they're going to take me anyways because I have the skills and whatnot. So that was in October of last year, 2023. I was a WooCommerce happiness engineer there. And then about January, February time period, we started a new team on WooCommerce in the happiness division to reach out and talk to customers, like in a live face-to-face. Hey, how can we help your customers or your site grow? What kind of issues are you having? And it really changed the game. Like to be in support for 8 years and just typing to people, like answering their tickets or answering their live chats, like, okay, here's your issue. I fixed it. Move on to the next one, move on to the next one, and not caring at all about, like, how do you fulfill orders and how do you do that? So there was a really cool connection that you could make, like, and it's mind boggling that there's people that are like, I don't even really know how to use WooCommerce. And then you log in their dashboard and they've done like $1.2 million, like in the last, 12 months. And you're like, well, you know something that's going on because, you're making money or whatnot. So that's kind of like the journey, kind of moving across the company, doing a bunch of things. And then most recently, and when this episode comes out, I think it'll be official that I am now a WooCommerce customer success manager. And so that is a kind of a long process. It took all summer to kind of go through there, but that basically means I'm working on the marketing team. So I'm not in our support department anymore, but I'm working with our high value merchants, those that are making $1 million or more, and just kind of being a relationship manager, like just trying to figure out like, oh, hey, they're having a problem with this. Like, let's look into that. And that's just not a WordPress WooCommerce thing. Like if they're having issues with getting Google Analytics to integrate with their site, like that's something that I would help with. And I think that's going to be a really neat opportunity to say like, oh, hey, I have these 10 clients and I'm really looking out for them. And I know their businesses inside and out. And I can recommend like, oh, hey, this is time, it's September. Like, what are you planning for Black Friday? Like, let's talk through that stuff because that's coming up, or, holiday sales or things along those lines. And so that's kind of where my journey and my role has went within Automattic over the last almost 11 years.
Yeah. So, and on that, so 2 things I want to kind of recap on that. What people may not realize, when you first started, there was no live chat. It was only tickets that you did. Based on being a happiness engineer, you just did tickets, which you could do from anywhere. That was like the whole thing. Is like you put in your time. There was no clocking in, clocking out. There was, there was tracking of some stuff and metrics, of course, on the inside. But you would just answer tickets. No voice, no emails, just live chat. I'm not live chat, just support tickets. And then I remember they added live chat. But I mean, like just answering, so a lifetime, and I guess all happiness people had to put in so many hours every week on that. And then it shifted. So to go from that now to being front facing to almost 11 years later is interesting, right? As a company and for you.
Right. And we're even like kind of looking at it internally, like, hey, maybe face-to-face is like a premium option because everybody now is getting AI responses, right? The first line of contacting support is getting AI, and then you actually will talk to a customer, but maybe there's a premium support that like just bypasses all of that and gets you straight to the front of the line. Who knows what that looks like.
And it's interesting because actually it's interesting to hear that Automattic's doing this for WordPress.com. Obviously, VIP has had people, TAMs, they called them, right? Technical account managers, and also in sales as well. Because I actually had talked to somebody about that role at one point because those clients were so high valued. They wanted that interaction. And they got that face-to-face time, travel, go see a client, onboard them, that kind of thing. And that's, I remember talking to Andrea Bishop about that role, or Camp Nashville, one of those two camps, but that would have been awesome. And that's when I was in a really bad job, if you remember, like that old auction place. That was terrible. That's why I wanted out so bad. Anyway, so I'm curious though. So 11 years later, you've had one sabbatical. You're about to go on a second sabbatical, if I'm not mistaken, which is awesome.
Yep.
What would you tell your 10-year past self, or even 5 years ago, like half the time, if you could do anything different in your WordPress life? What would you tell yourself? Something now from 5 years back. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, the question makes total sense. I don't know how to answer it though. Because I think back of like, even when I came back to WordPress.com support after the developer thing, like my heart was set on being a developer. I really wanted to do that, mainly because of the flexibility and the freedom, like no weekends, no scheduling. One of the things that we talked about was like, you were saying earlier, there was just tickets. You did tickets when you wanted to and whatnot. Well, as a global company now offering live chat, we have to be scheduled, and there have to be so many people online so we could, do that sort of thing. And so like kind of looking back on my journey, like, I don't know, like, I think I always continue to just kind of put the WordPress mindset kind of out in front. Like, if, you go to a WordCamp and you're never going to, you talk to random people, or, you just strike up conversations. Like, how do you do this? Or like, how do you manage your business or things like that? And everybody shares. Like, nobody's like, like pulling the information back. Like, oh, hey, I can't tell you anything about that. Like, you might steal some of my business or whatever, but like, it's kind of the WordPress way. And so I always feel like telling more people about WordPress or WooCommerce or, whatever, just has been like one of the greatest things of just being like, it's just exciting for me. It's being able to like teach other people to do kind of what I know how to do. And as the roles kind of change and as my knowledge changes, like I run a couple e-commerce websites, so I know like firsthand how this kind of stuff works. And to think back of like, 10 years ago when I started, 11 years ago when I started, like they asked me, would you be happy in this role for 5 years? And I was like, I just wanted the job. So I said, yes, like I would be happy, but I didn't, like I ultimately wanted to be like not in support, but doing something else. And I wouldn't have thought that it would have taken 10 and a half, 11 years, but like, that's just the way the journey was. And so now I have like those development skills. Like, I think I'm in a really cool spot being able to talk intelligently to a customer or like a potential customer. Like if they say, oh, can I do this with WooCommerce? Like, I'll know like, yes, we have a plugin for that, or, oh no, like, we need some custom code to make this work and things along those lines. So I'm fairly certain I did not answer your question about like what I could tell my previous self. But
okay, how about this for you?
It's interesting. Yeah.
So as this episode comes out, 2 milestones happen, which is one's funny-ish, whatever. But one of them is that you have a new role. So the episode this comes out is on September 2nd.
The new role starts on September 3rd.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So a day after. Do you think you'll be happy in that role for the next 5 years? Let's go that HR type question. So you answer that one first.
Yeah, I think so. I think that so the role that I've been in for the last 6 months has been talking with customers, like trying to figure out how we can optimize their sites or like do site reviews or give them advice based on like some of the things the trends that we're seeing in the e-commerce market and whatnot. And that has been really fun. Like, it's been really cool to connect on a personal level and, like ask questions like, oh, hey, if we could double your sales, like, could you handle it from a fulfillment side of things? Or, how are you tracking your metrics now? Like, are you looking at product pages? Like, how many people come to the product page versus how many people put it in the cart? Like, what kind of things are there? And just giving basically homework to these people to like improve their sites. And so I think that's really kind of where what's exciting about it is like you can take knowledge from people that you're talking to and then take it to other people, or like I can bring it in and selfishly use it for my own sites, like different things along those lines.
Right.
But I think in the way that things are structured, like in 5 years, I think I'd still be happy in the same role, meeting with customers and clients and like trying to help them and improve the WordPress brand too, like, or the WooCommerce brand. Like, you know, a lot of people are going to that place that starts with an S and ends with a Y. I think internally we've called it Shopacry. So it's just kind of like managing those expectations and letting people know like why WooCommerce might be a better solution for them or whatnot. So, so yeah, I see a lot of potential and, I don't know, like maybe I'll take this sabbatical and be like, I never want to work another day in my life.
Right.
But
how long
we'll
is
see.
this? Real quick, actually, I made a mistake. I realized that this episode, I'm not going to edit this out, does not come out on September 2nd. It's the week after. So
all right, perfect. So
by the
I
time
am in
this
the
drops,
new role.
Yeah, because this, by the way, that's the funny part about this episode, is this episode, the reason you're on it for a secondary reason, kind of a subtextual thing, it was your idea as well, the number wise. It's episode 550. Which now makes me have more episodes than you of your podcast.
This is correct.
Yeah, because you and I had this long-standing thing where we just never missed a week, and then finally, was it a year ago, 2 years ago, you just started taking breaks?
Oh, it was before that.
Okay.
Like there was I was very diligent. Like I'll go on a 3-week trip. I have 3 podcasts recorded, and then like life gets busy. Obviously, you know, like we're in a different life situation. Like I'm significantly younger and my kids are younger. I'm just kidding. Yeah. But like, and then it became to the point where it's like, I didn't want to just put out episodes to put out episodes.
Right.
And then it was like, well, I kind of like to do plugin reviews or kind of like structure things of like, oh, WooCommerce, a new version of WordPress came out, or let's talk about that. And then it's just like, man, with the day job and then like trying to run all the sites for my wife's and her business. And then I've been doing a lot more like, I don't know if self-care is the right word, but like, you know, like instead of like being done at the end of the day, I've run experiments of like at 4:30, my computer turns off, not necessarily turns off. I walk away from it and I don't touch it again till tomorrow. And so like whatever I didn't get done, like it, you know, like I'm doing a lot more
like you said, I mean, your kids are younger. I mean, your daughter's what, 10 now? So 10 and 8, 10 and 7?
7. 10 and 7.
Yeah. My youngest is 19. I see him maybe once a day because he sleeps till 2, whatever, you know. I have the time, the ability. So it's we've shifted those roles. So obviously it's just a different place in life. So I have more time now than I did when I started the podcast, technically. So I keep going.
And I think honestly now, like with this new role, like I'm not scheduled for stuff, and I could easily, you know, put the podcast in, but then it's like, I mean, it's good. It was always my contribution back to WordPress. Like that was always kind of my thing. Like, hey, I'm not going to be fixing PRs and like getting my name into the credits and whatnot, but like I can provide free education every single week. And like, but then it's like, well, I need to do an episode, but then the episode takes so much time to prep for and then do. And then it's like, well, my site's outdated and there's some things that need to happen over there. You know, like there's like a laundry list of things. And am I done podcasting? I can't say that for certain. Like I still enjoy doing it. Like,
and things change. I mean, look, Get Options finally kind of had I mean, because Kyle got super busy with, you know, 6 kids, you know, time gets away from you. You know, you have to make a choice. Right. So.
Right. And if there was a, you know, like if it was something that was like Adam and Dustin comes on every week and talks about the latest things that are happening in WordPress or WooCommerce or whatever, like that doesn't take a lot of prep. That, you know, like that would be like something that would be kind of in the news type segment or, you know, kind of talking like that. Instead of, I always felt like, am I repeating this topic too many times, or like, are people like interested in this? Like when I was in support and doing like regular WordPress or WooCommerce support, things would come up like, oh man, I cannot believe how many admin notices are on this page. Like, you know, you have to scroll 3 times to actually see what's happening in the WordPress dashboard. Like, okay, that could be a topic of a show. Or I cannot believe that somebody did this. Like they restored a backup and then lost 400 orders on their site. You know, like let's talk about like things along those lines. Like, okay, that comes up with good content and good strategies of things to think about.
Right. But once you step away from that, it changes.
And even at the beginning of the year, like okay, how can I get out 50 episodes this year in 2024? And I think there might be 4 or 5, like it's just because things get busy and like I've been prioritizing like fitness and health and like being outside and like shutting down and going to bed early and waking up early. And it's just like, there's just not time for it.
Right.
We've sent our kids to a different school this year, and I've been trying to like be done when they get home from school. Like that was kind of one of the things. Like we have a lot more free time. It's not free, but it's, you know, time for working when they're at school. And so it's like, well, if I can get everything done while they're in school, then
it's being
the
intentional
isn't
with
as
the
rushed,
time
right?
and choices, right?
Right. Yeah. You know how so often it was like, I'll come up out of my office at 4:30 and we've got to leave at 4:35 to go to a sports activity. And then like, then it's like by 9 o'clock, you're still like cleaning up the kitchen and after they've went to bed and whatnot. So I'm trying to be a little bit more proactive on all of those things of like, hey, I'll be done early and let's get the dishwasher cleaned up earlier in the day. Like, so there's not as much to do in the evening and things along those lines. And so that's kind of where my priorities are right now. And it makes things feel less busy and less kind of chaotic all the time, when you're kind of staying on top of things. But again, the list of things to do is never ending and there's always stuff to do. And especially this week, I'm trying to get rid of all the work that I have assigned to me because I have 2 more days in this role. And so it's like, oh, well, this customer hasn't responded. Like, Joe on my team, you're in charge of this one. And so like, so like these next couple of days is just a lot of just like closing things down or deleting things and like kind of I want a fresh start. It's the day after Labor Day is when I start. And so like I have a nice 3-day weekend and then I start the new role.
Right. And then you go to WordCamp US.
Yeah. So it's a couple weeks in WordCamp US. And so that's really kind of an exciting thing. Like we are going to be promoting and like my big thing is like helping people like use Woo payments. That's kind of the big thing that we kind of push just because like then we can control the entire experience. Like you don't have to reach out to Stripe or to PayPal if you have payment issues and things. And so it's a couple weeks and a couple weeks in the new job, a week in Portland for WordCamp US, a couple weeks in the new job. And then we have a division meetup, which I was planning on going to anyways. I'm still staying in the WooCommerce division. And so that's all of the people that are in WooCommerce, which is a ton. I was looking at the list this morning and it's hundreds of people are coming to this division meetup. And then shortly after that, maybe, I don't know, it might be the day after, it might be a month after, depending on a couple things, and then a sabbatical, a 3-month paid sabbatical. And so I'm like, I don't want to be that guy who like gets a brand new job and then like just goes to sabbatical, but HR says, okay, my new team lead's like, I don't care when you take it. And so, so at some point, so then that's when I get to do all the house projects and all of the things that have just been kind of like slowly accumulating for the last 5 years. Because the last time I had a sabbatical, we just moved into this house and I built a deck and I built all these projects. And it's like, okay, well, I need another 3 months off of no work to do all these things.
All the things. Yeah. Cool. Yep. Well, it's a heck of a 10 years. And it's been a heck of a, 2016 since the last episode. A lot of changes.
Yeah.
It's got you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's been great. I mean, I've thoroughly loved our friendship.
Yeah. Most of the time.
I'd say all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been good. It's nice that we share the love of WordPress, but then there's also like a fitness aspect of it, or like, did you hear this, or do you do this? I'm like getting big into like cold plunging. I keep telling Adam he needs a cold plunge, and these different things, and just trying to like level ourselves up or better ourselves. A lot of times it's hey, what's on the docket for today? What you doing? And then like my list is like a million things long and I get 3 done. And Adam's like, I've done all these things already. And like, it's just kind of like again, a different life situation and whatnot, but like, it's a cool thing to like meet and have friends that you share some sort of like common thing with. And even though we're hundreds of miles apart, like we tend to get together a
couple times a year. I mean,
exactly.
And most recently I surprised you at your 40th.
Let's not talk about how old I am.
He's 40, people, but I am older by a solid decade and change. Anyway, all right. I think that's a good update, good place to cut here. Last question, of course. People always like to know, what are the 3 tools you use on a daily basis, kind of thing that people like to know, business tools.
Yeah, business tools.
Or life tools.
Yeah, I use a lot of things. Let's see, what's open on my computer right now? I've been really digging Arc lately. So the browser Arc. The thing that I really like is the side-to-side view. And so like if I'm on a customer call, I'll put like their website in the left, and then in the center will be their picture or their like Google Meet. And then on the right will be, hey, I'm looking at their ticket or something like that. So I can see 3 things and I'm not cluttered up with multiple windows and multiple screens. And that's been working really, really well for me lately. I also use, a tool that I really like, I use a lot, even though I don't podcast that much, is I've been using Descript. It is a software that basically, you take your audio file, you drop it in, and then it transcribes the whole thing. And then you can edit based on the transcription. So when you're like, professional, like Adam and myself, like you don't edit a whole lot, but when you are doing something like I edit the WP briefing podcast, which is Josepha's WordPress.org podcast. And then I do a bunch of stuff for my wife. She's got a podcast. And when you aren't on the recording, like you don't know what needs to be cut out. And so like, it's very easy to see like Josepha always like has like 3 paragraphs worth of stuff. Like I'm going to start here and I'm going to do this in one take. I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. And so then I can just like, I don't even have to listen to that. I can just cut it all out. And then you can export. You can also do video, which is pretty cool. So you can do that in there. And then a toss up on some of the other ones that are out there. I'll do rapid fire real quick. I'll do more than 3 though, but I've got OmniFocus is where I keep my brain of like all the things that are going on. I'm big into using Hey, which is HEY, which is the email program by 37 Signals. And the last one is Nova, which is a Apple silicone. It's made by Panic Software, and that is the one that is like a code editor that's optimized for Apple silicone. So I use
Nova
that.
or Coda?
Coda was the old one. They've rebranded and renamed it to Nova.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so that is the scoop. Those are the things. Those are the things that I have open pretty much all the time on my computer.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. The update's awesome. I mean, obviously we're good friends. We talk daily, mostly. Most days we at least a text message of some sort. And maybe have you on, in sooner than, let's say 2016, we're in 2024, maybe sooner than later.
2030 or so.
Yeah,
that's when I pencil myself in.
Anyway, thanks again. And I'll see you. I don't know when I'll see you. I'll see you sometime.
Yep.
All right. Thanks. Bye. And again, thanks, Dustin, for taking the time. And we talk all the time. So wasn't like I hadn't talked to him in forever or just saw him a few months ago, but always fun to talk and get to know what's going on there. So cool. All right, moving on. Segment 3, tip and tool of the week. This week's tip, it's actually, I guess it's a tool. It's a website, fundwp.com. It's a vision shared by David Gray and Andrew Palmer, both very seasoned veterans of the WordPress ecosystem. And their mission is simple: secure consistent funding for WordPress, keeping the build of open source platform without compromising principles. And there's a link in the show notes, fundwp.com, how you can help for transparency, accountability, fair compensation, increased sponsorship, etc. Check it out over at fundwp.com. I have no connection to them. I just thought it was interesting, so I want to share with you. All right, that's the tip of the week. All right, that is it for this week. If you have any questions, go ahead, send it in via email, adam@kitchensinkwp.com, or use that speak pipe function on the website. If you want to support the show, you can do that. There's a Patreon button. You could also buy me a coffee. If you want to sponsor the show, there's a form you need to fill out, and I'll get back to you on that. Thanks for listening. See you next week. Now go out and do some awesome things with WordPress. All right, bye-bye.